Hello everyone and welcome to a tutorial on Express.js and specifically how to build a REST API. This is part one of the tutorial, which we will be covering how to create the JavaScript model implementation and also test that model with a unit test. So what will be created at the final product of all the tutorials, it will be a Express.js REST API to hold email context, and it will be fully tested using the JavaScript library Mocha. In this part one, we will cover the model creation in JavaScript and the unit testing of that using Mocha, and we also start setting up the application structure for the application. And so what will we actually be building? So we'll be building an application that will house email contacts, and each email contact will consist of the following properties: as unique ID, as a first name, a last name, and an email, which is also unique. So the first thing we're going to actually do is, if you don't have Mocha installed already, we're going to install it using npm, or you can use Yarn. I recommend installing it as a global dependency. So use one of these commands here. And this is all on the Mocha.js site. So the next thing we're going to do is actually start writing our test in our project. We haven't written any of our models yet, so our tests are going to fail at first, but you'll kind of see how using this style of writing the test first and then writing the actual code to pass it tends to help you a lot when you're writing applications, as they tend to have less bugs if you do it, if you adhere to the test-driven development philosophy. And test-driven development also makes it easier to refactor your code. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to your terminal and you're going to create your project using Yarn init or npm init, whatever you use. We went through the process of doing that, and actually in my last video I can link it. But now I already have that done, and also what I did is I created a test folder here. And so what we'll do is we'll house all our tests in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to open this up in our editor. So you can see I have my package.json file, pretty bare right now. And we also have our test folder. And what we're going to do is actually write our first test. So that's going to be our model. So it's going to be contacts.test.js. I just prefer doing that test.js at the end because it makes it easier to identify that this file is just for testing. And the first line we're going to do is const expect equals, so we're going to require the library chi, and then .expect. Okay, now we're actually going to run this test, and what you'll see is it won't work. So if we just run Mocha, it can't find the module chi. So what we need to do is we need to add it. So we need to yarn add chi. And now we can run the same thing. And we have 0 passing tests, but this actually works, so it pulled in chi. Okay, so now the next step is actually turning this Mocha into a script for our project. So what we can do is we can just put down in here a script section. And the script that we wanted to run is test. So, and what we can do is we can do Mocha. There's also another thing you can do, which I've seen some sites recommend, is you can actually change the reporter for Mocha. And what you'll do is you'll pass in the reporter option, and it'll be a reporter spec. And now what we can do is, if we go back to our terminal, we can actually just do yarn test, and it runs the Mocha script for us. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go over to our contacts test folder, and we're going to require in our model. And so that's just going to be require. Now this doesn't exist yet because we're writing the test code before we actually write the implementation code for the model. So we're going to go back, and then we're going to have a models folder, and it's going to be in the contact. And now let's run yarn test, and we see we can't find this models contact. So now what we have to do is we build a models folder. And we're going to create a contact JS file, and it found the folder. It found the file. So now we're actually going to be writing our first test. So the first thing we do is we describe what the test is going to do. So that's done by this function describe, and it takes in two parameters for our case, and the first one is a string, so like a user friendly name for it. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to call this the contacts test. And then it also has a function, a callback function, which it called. So we're going to describe our contacts test, and then so what is it going to do? And then it should return a list of contacts. Contacts list equal contacts dot get all contacts. And then we're going to expect contacts list dot to and array. So we're expecting that this contacts list that we're getting back is going to be an array. So now run the test, and we see that contacts that get all contacts is not a function. That's because we haven't written it yet, and we haven't exported it yet. So now we're going to first off, we're going to use this use strict to tell express that we're using ES6. So now we're creating a function that's get all contacts, and we're just going to return an empty array. And so now we're going to see if that worked, and it doesn't work because we haven't exported the function. So now we're going to do export module.exports, and then we're going to do get all contacts as get all contacts. And now we're going to see if that worked. Okay, so now we got a list of contacts back from this get all contacts method. Great, so now we have a way to get all the contacts, but when you're dealing with databases in general, you're not going to get that data back like right away when you're calling it from Node.js. Typically you'll get it back in a callback or a promise. So we're actually going to reconfigure our model to use a promise to return all this. And so the way we're going to do that is instead of returning the array, I'm going to do return promise, And then what you got to give it a function to resolve and reject. And all we're going to do here is we're just going to resolve it with the blank array. So now we're going to run the test, and as you can see, it failed because it returned a promise instead of the array. So how do we reconfigure our test to expect a promise of an array? So what we're actually going to do is we're going to use so the callback we're going to pass to the if function is we're going to specify a done function. And so what you'll do is when this test is actually done, you'll call the done function. Otherwise, Mocha might not know when the test is actually finished, because when you're dealing with asynchronous code, you're not exactly sure when everything's going to finish. And then we're also going to switch this, so then we're going to tell it that we get all the contacts, and then with those contacts that we resolved, we're gonna we don't even need this contacts list. So we're going to put it up here because that's what's going to be resolved, and then we're just going to move this expect statement into here, and we're going to call the done function. So now we're actually going to test this out, and we see that we get the list of contacts working. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in a contact to the list, and then so the way we're going to do that is a contact to the contacts list. And we're going to do contacts dot add contact, and we're actually going to specify the contact up here. So it's going to be first name Tim, last name Jones, and his email is going to be tjones@example.com. And for our sake, let's just say his ID, he is the first contact. And we're going to do contacts to add contact, new contact, and that then. And what we're actually going to expect back from this is the contact that we put in. And then, so it's going to be contact, we're going to call it contact result. And we're going to just do expect contact result dot to dot have, and then it's going to have a first name, and so it's going to fail right now, so let's actually just watch it fail. And contacts to add contact is not a function, so we're going to do function add contact, and here's going to take in the new contact. And then what we're just going to do is return a promise of And then we're going to resolve it with the new contact. And we just need to remember to export the add contact function. So now we can test it out. And you see what happened here is Mocha didn't know when the test ended because we never called done. And so if you get like one of those timeout errors and you're not using like a database or something that would take longer than that, then you probably should make sure that you're actually calling done. Okay, so now we're actually getting this unhandled promise rejection warning, and I suspect it's because I incorrectly wrote the test code. So I believe it is .have property first name, and it adds a contact to the list, and now we need to verify that the first name is actually this guy's first name. So we're going to expect contact result dot first name. We're going to say it should equal this new contact dot first name. And then we're going to repeat this code for the first name, last name, and email. And now we're going to run our test. And the contact we're getting back is indeed this new one. Also, another thing is you can have it so your database client can generate the ID for your new contact, or what you can actually do is have the database generate automatically. So that's what we're going to do. So we're not going to pass in this ID anymore, and we're going to expect that it gets back an ID because we want the database to have that. And we're not going to know what this ID is going to equal since it's going to be unique to each thing. But what we can do is expect the type of it. To be an so we're going to make sure it's a number. Okay, so now we're actually going to be reconfiguring our testing for better support for promises. So it turns out we don't actually have to do this done. So what we can actually do is, since Mocha has built-in support, we can just return the promise itself and get rid of this and get rid of the done. Okay, so now the error we're getting is that we don't have a property ID. So we're just going to tell this add contact to adding an ID. So new contact ID equals 1. And we're going to test that that actually does that. And okay, so now we can add a contact to the list. So The next thing that we need to do is we need to reformat our test so that because when we actually add in a new contact, should actually add it to the list. So be added to the list. And so what that's going to do is we're actually going to put this into here. Let's just get our spacing correctly, and then should update the list. And we're just going to take our code from here. So we're expecting that's going to be an array. And we're going to expect that the length of the array is 1. We're going to pull this out of here so new contact can be accessible to the next thing. And then what we're going to do is we're just do contact result equals contacts list. So it's going to be the first one, and then we're going to expect that it has all these things that we added to it. Okay, so now we're getting back an actual length of 0, and we expected 1. So now we're going to actually create the contacts object. So let contacts equals blank array. Here we're going to resolve contacts, and here we're just going to do contacts dot push new contact, and that should pass the test. So now we can add a contact to the list, and the list actually gets updated. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to check that all the contacts have a unique ID, because we're going to be using that unique ID to get them. So get one contact with an ID, and we're also going to be able to delete a contact with a given ID. So now what we're going to do is contacts should have unique IDs. And normally this is handling your database, but since when we're actually testing our REST API, since we're going to test the individual JavaScript unit test and the database test like separately and confirm that they both have the same results, when we're running our local test, we're going to have our actual API test run against our mock JavaScript database and our mock JavaScript object database. So like just this simple context object, and it's also going to be run against like an actual database. But what we're going to do is we have to make the mock object behave more like the database. So when you're running with like an SQL database, it will make sure the IDs are unique for you. But here we need to actually ensure that our JavaScript object, since we're just putting 1 here, it's not going to be unique unless we tell it to be unique. So now we're actually going to create a new contact, and let's just name this guy Jeff. and what it's going to do is which should add him to the contact list, and then it also should update the list. And this should equal 2. And have unique IDs. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do we're going to check that the actual each of the IDs is unique. So we're just going to do let equal, so we don't, so it's not defined at first. And for contact, for let contact in contacts list. So if contact dot ID equals so what we're going to do is expect here we're going to expect contact dot ID dot to not equal last ID, and we're just going to set last ID equals our contact.id. That way we loop through finding out all their contacts IDs, and we make sure it's not the last one. I mean, this won't fully ensure that it is unique, but for this JavaScript mock, this will actually ensure that, you know, it's not just returning 1 all the time. I believe this is of. Okay, so now it says expected 1 to not equal 1. So we're going to do, now we're just going to add the incrementing. So let last ID equals 0. And this is just going to equal plus plus last ID. Okay, so now we have the unique IDs working. So next thing we're going to do is we should be able to get the unique ID or to get contact by its ID. And it should return 1 contact. So it's going to be return contacts dot get contact by ID, and we're just going to do 1, and then so we're going to do contact, and what we're going to do is we're going to expect all this stuff from it. Now when we run it, we don't have the get contact by ID function, so what we're going to do is we're going to do and we're going to return the promise, Now what we're going to do is just resolve the um, first thing in contacts, because that will make this test pass. We need to add it. So new contact is not defined. Oh, so here we were just checking that they were the new contact that we inserted, but we don't actually know what we're going to get back. Okay, so now we are able to get a contact by an ID. So what we need to do is we need to actually add a contact and ensure that the one we're getting back is the one that we wanted. Select contact, new contact. Well, let's just copy the inner objects. So now we can do Tom. And now what we're actually going to do is we're going to do, say, new contact.id, because we're going to need the ID later on, equals contact result.id. And here, what we're going to do is we can get the new contact.id, and now it's actually just going to be this code right here. So now we're ensuring that the one we asked for is the one that we're getting back. Okay, so we asked for one contact and we got back the wrong one. So now what we need to do is switch this get contacted by ID to get it. So what we're just going to do is we're going to do contacts.filter. Here we're going to have an inner contact. And we can close that, and this is going to be the first one from the filtered. And we're just going to do contact.id ID, and we're going to return this. So we're going to return the one where the contact ID equals the ID we're looking for. And now the test should work. Okay, so now we're able to get the contact that we actually want. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is we're actually going to delete, be able to delete a contact. So what we're going to do is, so we can delete contact by ID. So what the test is essentially going to do is we're going to add a new contact. We're going to get the list of contacts, see that it's in that list, and then we're going to delete it and then re-get the list of contacts. So we're going to do, first off, we're going to add a contact. Let's just name him please delete me. And we're just going to do please dot delete. at example.com. And okay, so we can add the contact. And now we're going to fetch the list. Or now we're going to fetch the contact by ID. And then what we can do is delete the contact. Oh. So we're just going to do return contacts dot delete contact by ID, and that's going to be new contact.id. Alright, so now we need to create it. And we're just going to make sure we export it. And all we're going to do is just resolve it, saying okay. We deleted it. Okay, so now that passes. So what we need to do is we need to ensure that it deleted it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to return an error from the promise. So we're going to do .catch. So now we need to check on how to actually assert that the error is thrown with the promise. Alright. So now what we need to do is we need to assert that the error is actually thrown. Expect error dot message dot to equal not found. Okay. So now we're getting the error that the error isn't thrown. So now what we actually need to do is we need to so here we're going to delete the contact. So contacts equals contacts dot filter contact return contact dot ID does not ID. Alright. So now, okay. So here what we did is we actually returned the promise. So now what we need to do is figure out how to tell it to fail if it gets one back. Alright, so now we're actually going to check what it's actually getting back. So this is going to be a contact result. And then, so what we're going to do is we're just going to log the contact result and see what this test is getting back. Okay, so what's actually happening is this is resolving if it can't find it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do let contact equal this, and so if contact doesn't equal undefined, we're going to resolve the contact. Else, we're going to reject new error, and the error we're throwing is not found. Okay, so now it actually works. And what we can do here is just to ensure that this isn't getting calling, we're just going to fail the test if it gets here. So if it actually returns one. So we need to do dot two, so expect 1 to equal 0. And that way it won't get there. Alright, so now what we have is we have our contact model, which we can get all the contacts, we can get the contact by ID, and we can delete it by ID and add the contact. So this is the base of our model, and then we have some unit tests working for it. So in the next tutorial, what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be starting to interface that with Express and actually start developing the API for it.